Well, hello, friends, and welcome once again to another episode of the 360 Experience podcast. I'm your host, Tim Braheem, and today I'm going to be having a conversation with a very unique guest. His name is Cody Hardridge, and Cody was introduced to me via email by Josh Metal, and I think you all know who Josh is at this point, dear friend of mine, and I take Josh's advice to heart. And he said, hey, this guy's a great guy, and you need to interview him. And I literally went into this conversation cold. Didn't really know what I was getting into. And I'm so glad that I followed Josh's lead. Cody is a very experienced mentor in the mortgage space. He started in the mortgage business in 2001, became a massive top producer in the industry in 2013 and for many years thereafter. But more importantly, he's transitioned into being a coach of the originators that work for him. So he is a true leader in the space in every sense of the word. He embodies, based upon my conversation with him, what I view to be like what a real leader should be doing in the mortgage industry, which is really guiding the originators that work underneath them to greater levels of success. But he does it not with just the tactics of what you need to do to be a successful originator, but maybe more importantly, the real estate between your ears, the mindset, the accountability, the support, and the goal setting that is important to being successful. So I think you're going to learn a lot. You're going to get a lot of great ideas. We're going to unpack some books that we've both read together that we like. I mean, and we immediately found, I think, a really nice kinship between the two of us, and you'll feel that energy in this episode. Before we get to the episode, I want to thank you for being a subscriber. If you are, if you're not, please subscribe. Forward this along to somebody who might benefit from it. If you like the episode, give us a like or make a comment. And I also want to thank our sponsor, the Loan Atlas. Man, the Loan Atlas is really taking off, folks, and guiding originators to super high levels of performance in today's market. You need to check it out if you haven't already. We'll put a link in the show notes below. Thank you to the Loan Atlas for sponsoring the 360 Experience podcast. And without further ado, my friends, my conversation with Cody Hardridge and the 360 Experience. Man, it's really nice to meet you, and I'm really glad that Josh Metal introduced us to each other. And I think that I jumped the gun a little bit because when Josh sent me the text, said, "Hey, you should have this guy on your podcast. He's amazing." I guess I kind of assumed that he talked to you about it because the next thing you knew, I'm like scheduling you for the podcast, and you're like, I don't even know what we're going to talk about or who this guy is. So thanks for being such a trooper, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that you've probably experienced this before, but Josh and I got to spend a few days together for the first time, just he and I. And I'm sure you've met people before that you're just completely aligned with. And so I think that's what Josh and I's experience was there. And so he probably had no qualms about just throwing me a ball that I wasn't ready for. He knew I'd be okay with it, I'm sure.
Well, he spoke very highly of you, and he immediately had me excited about meeting you, and I'm glad that we're here today. So thank you so much for your time.
I want to finally meet you.
Thank you. So you've been in the business since 2001. You've consistently been a top producer in the industry since 2013. You now mentor and coach a lot of the originators that work underneath you. Let's just first start foundationally with what are 2 or 3 things that you did when you go back through the course of your career that you did as an originator that you think had a lot to do with your success?
Yeah, that's a really good place to start. I've had an interesting kind of career arc. I started in 2001 and was a broker then, subprime broker doing debt consolidation loans. And like a lot of people, just kind of fell into the business with some buddies that had started a mortgage brokerage. And while I love those guys, they're still great friends. Still give them a lot of credit for getting me into the business. They just didn't teach me anything. They didn't know anything themselves. And so I found myself trying to kind of unlock the secret of turning the tap on in this business. And Tim, I tried everything. I mean, there's nothing that's marketing that I haven't tried, from print ad, to having dialers, television advertisements, radio shows, radio advertisements, everything you can possibly think of to drive traffic. And, after the mortgage meltdown, I went to a big national bank, just looking for sales training, and guidance on how to be successful in the purchase business, because I could see the writing on the wall and that's the direction things were going. I did get some of that sales training that I was looking for. But what's important during this time is I met a very unique couple that ended up being really influential in my career. Their names are Brian and Heather Bomar. And it was really interesting. I went to work with them, and they were just completely different than anyone I ever met. How they lived their life, how they operated their businesses. And what was really unique about them is they just opened their playbook up and said, if you'll do these things, you'll get the exact same results that we get. And so I went to work copying the things that they were doing, implementing those things, putting them into place. And it just completely changed the trajectory of my career. Within about 36 months, I was competing to be the number one originator in terms of, funded families in the state of Oklahoma. And so it was a pretty fast rise. And kind of that's a big part of my story, is that there was about a 4-year span where I was able to add about 100 units of new purchase money from new sources per year for about 4 years. And at the end of that, I'd reached a bigger goal, which I really wanted to help 400 families a year. That was a big kind of goal that I had. But if we have to break it down into, some of the key things that allowed that to happen, I have to start, and this isn't going to be accessible for everybody that listens to this, but I did spend some time in the Marine Corps when I was a kid, and was introduced to a pretty unique brand of personal discipline, along with all of the other kind of intangible leadership qualities that they instill in their recruits. And so in that time, I discovered that I had a natural attraction to leadership, beginning with my own personal leadership, because that's really what I was there for. And so, when I got out into the civilian world, especially in the mortgage business, and found myself surrounded by civilians, I realized that I had a kind of a unique advantage over them, in that I could probably put up with a lot more, physical and mental pain than they could, just from my time in the service. And so I went about trying to outwork everyone, right? I wasn't going to let anybody work harder than me. So, I would say that, like, if you have an aversion to really hard work for long periods of time, I think you're going to struggle, to try to scale a business. And then I would say that the second thing, Tim, and this is something that I like to talk about, is that most people don't decide for greatness. They don't actually make a decision to do it. And what I have found out, if you look at the word decide, the old English words for decide mean to cut off. And so what I've learned is that making a decision means that you're cutting yourself off from any other options. Okay. And most people I've found, especially in coaching, and talking to other originators, is that people have a tendency to leave themselves kind of an escape hatch to mediocrity, if you will, right? Some kind of an out on whatever their big goal is, and they end up settling for less. And so I would say the second thing is going to be that I made a decision, that I was going to do this, and that I was going to burn all the bridges behind me, and there were no other options, Brett. And so that would probably be the second thing. And the third thing for me was my own personal development. I became a personal development junkie during that time, and had been introduced to some new thought leaders, introduced to some new books. And I began looking at my own personal life and realized that I was spending a ton of time doing things that were really creating negativity in my life and bringing negativity into my life, whether it was people or the shows I was watching, how I was spending my time. And so I literally audited my life, cut all of those things out, and replaced it with positive personal development material, and started developing new habits, like a daily success ritual. That's something that my friend Josh and I hold in common. It's a very dear part of our lives. That time every morning where we're working on ourselves and becoming the person that we need to become to achieve our goals. And, began building habits there in that ritual, beginning with, waking up and working out every morning, introducing my body to some pain. I learned later that whenever we work out, that neurochemicals get released, neurochemicals of achievement. And so a lot of people that do this on a regular basis will find that they have some of their strongest insights, in those morning sessions. Reading personal development, I became just a huge consumer of knowledge. And so I found out that if I read 45 minutes a day, I could get through 52 books a year. And so I went from reading maybe a half a book a year to 40 or 50 new books a year. And, I've been doing that for well over a decade now. So all of those lessons that I learned, and as I read those books, I would read them through the lens of how is this going to impact me in my mortgage career? And I would take note of the lessons, and then I would literally, go back to the office and turn myself into a laboratory, putting those things into play. And I would get the same positive results that those authors got. And so it was really, a journey of personal and professional development for me that kind of led me to the results that I was getting. And I think a really important thing to remember here, and it's an insight that I've had, is that really successful people in life, they don't have that success on the outside, okay, before they become the person on the inside. And it really is an inside game, almost all of it. And so once I realized that the solution was actually in my control, it's something that I had control over, that's when I got really excited, right? Because I felt like I could really write my own ticket and there was nothing that could stop me. So if I had to break it down into the three things, I would say those are three major things that impacted my career early on.
Yeah. So what I heard you say is that outer experiences are a reflection of inner reality. And you're absolutely right that, I'll go so far as to say that the only relationship that we're ever really having is the one with ourselves, and that everything
Correct.
else is a spawned byproduct of that. So far too many people are looking to the outside world and what they need to fix in the outside world and can't quite figure out why it is that they're not moving the needle. And that's because you need to look inward. I'm going to ask you a question in just a minute. And I'll ask it to you now so you can think about it, and then I want to comment on something else you said.
Sure.
Love to know your top three, the first three books that come to mind in the personal development realm. So maybe we can hold that for a second. The other thing that I want to comment on that you said that I think is really important, and it's become something that's just come to the forefront of my thought process in the last week. Not that I hadn't thought about it many times before, but success leaves clues, and I think that sometimes we make things harder than we need to make them. So I was on a call yesterday with a member of the Loan Atlas, a new member. His name is Rick Garcia. He writes for Inman, and he was wanting to interview me for that publication. And he was really kind and sharing with me some of the things that he's learned from our learning platform and from our coaching, and that he's implemented. And I was sitting and listening. I was thinking, I know this to be true, that so my first soiree into all of this was a Todd Duncan event. And I know that you're a Todd Duncan fan and that you're one of his programs, right? So that was my first Todd event in '93, Sales Mastery in Palm Springs. And I remember sitting there in the audience, and I had this epiphany, this just moment of total clarity on like the second or third day. I was watching these great teachers, Jim McMahon and Greg Frost and Jeff Flake and Barry Habib. Yeah. I had this awareness that the only difference between those folks up there and all of us down here is that they're doing it and we're not, because they're telling us exactly what it is that they're doing that has led to their success. And I bought all the audio cassettes. So now I'm dating myself like big. This was just after 8-track, bro. Okay. So I bought all the cassettes, and I went home and I started listening in particular to Jim McMahon, who I just recently had as a guest on this podcast. And
great guy.
Yeah, of course. One of the great original teachers in this industry. And I completely bought into the fact that if I say the things that he says, if I do the things that he does, I'm going to have the success that he has. And guess what? I did. And just to support what you were saying earlier with Brian Bomar and his wife, how they opened their playbook up to you. And I just didn't want that part to be skipped or missed over to everyone who's listening here. It's like, just replicate what the kind giving people are sharing with you that are teachers in this industry, and it will work, but it's about taking action with it. So I love the fact that I actually asked you a question, and I'm totally cool with this, of course, that I thought was going to result in a tactical response of like, what are 2 or 3 things that you did that you think had everything to do with your success? And you told us about this playbook. And we don't know what's in the playbook, but then you immediately pivoted to 3 things that didn't really have anything to do with the tactical, had everything to do with the inside job and the personal development realm. So let's stay there for a minute. What are 3 books in the personal development realm that just jumped to mind that have really impacted you?
So I want to cheat a little bit. I'm going to say anything by Jim Rohn. Matter of fact, all of them. All of his books are fantastic. I love Brian Tracy. Eat That Frog, I think is an important book from a productivity standpoint. The Compound Effect, and its sister book. I don't remember the exact name of it. I don't know if you know that. There's an actual Darren had a partner that wrote a very similar book, but the Compound Effect was pretty impactful for me in understanding that concept, and that, consistent activity done over time will yield huge results. But most people don't focus on consistency. They're looking at quantity and quality instead of consistency. And consistency is the real answer to actually making gains and growing. And Atomic Habits is another good one.
I was just thinking of James Clear, so you keep going.
Yeah, James. And in my work as a coach and as a leader, what I'm really trying to help humans do is to change their habits from the time they wake up and go to sleep, because that is our reality. And it's the only period of our lives that we have any kind of control over. And I'll explain to the originators that I work with that your life is a collection of habits from the time you wake up until the time you go to bed. And the secrets to all of our work together are going to lie in those things, right? What are you actually doing with your time? And it may not be what you're doing. It may be what you're not doing, as you know. Whether it's how you're running your brain on a daily basis and how you're talking to yourself and how you think, or how you run your day, right? It may be skill set related. But there's going to be some kind of habit in there that is impacting the results in your life. And so as a coach, that's one of the things that I want to look at is like, what are the things that are holding you back? What are the habits that need to be put in place, right? And then also you have to be able to help people establish those habits, right? And so that book was pretty foundational for me in just understanding how habits work and how humans work. And I think it's an important part of the work that you do as a coach, any coach, because we're all working on helping them to change their habits, whether it's how they think, how they feel, or how they act.
Yeah, I remember in the book, Clear talks about that habits are formed based upon frequency and not time, and I think that that's a really important thing for everybody to get their head around. I remember when I was an originator, I started when I was 25 years old, and I started off out of the gate pretty hot, refi boom in 92, 93,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of consumer direct marketing, direct mail, old school stuff that was getting the phone to ring, and was doing 3-4 loans a month. And then I started to decide that I needed to go out and build relationships with real estate agents. And I was like this young kid, I'd be meeting with like a 40-year-old realtor, and I was 26 or 27 years old. And I remember at that time I had a telemarketing operation, and I would go upstairs every night and take direct transfer calls into my headset 5 nights a week. And I'd talk to, dozens of people a night. And I remember my script became, and it was my truth, was I would say to real estate agents, look, I realize that I look young and I am young, but the reality of it is that I've had more at-bats than most people that are 10 years older than me, because I've consistently put myself in front of a lot of people, and I've developed some really, really important foundational educational scripting that I can bring as a value proposition to your clients if you're kind enough to refer them to me. And it worked, right? Because it was the truth. Because
right.
Based upon how long you've been in business. And I share this because there are people that are listening to this, and I've been running into young people lately that I really feel a kinship towards, that are 22, 23, 24 years old, that are getting in the business, and they're desperate. They're thirsty for education and information. And then they also have that storyteller that you're talking about going on in the back of their head that's saying, yeah, but I haven't been doing this very long, or I'm not as old as my competition. And what I want to make sure that I'm saying, and I'd love to hear any further feedback from you on this as a coach, is like, that's just your story. I mean, you got to get out there and get yourself a lot of at-bats, because new habits, successful habits, are based upon the frequency with which you engage in the activity, not how old you are or how long you've been in the business for. What would you share as it relates to that?
You're absolutely spot on, is what I would say. And even to take it even a step further, when I'm working with someone, we've all heard the saying, what you measure will improve or grow, right? But the problem is people measure the wrong things. And so if I'm trying to set somebody up with a new habit that's going to be helpful to their business, I'm going to have them measure that for me and track that in a way that's a deliverable for me. And people measure the wrong things. People measure the results. They measure the production.
Example of like something that people measure that's a wrong thing, and then what you would adjust them to measuring, and then
Yeah.
support them and hold them accountable to. I
Yeah.
think
Great example. And you see companies, every company in the business does this. Monthly production reports. How many loans did you close for the month? That's the result, right? It's not the thing that actually needs to be addressed to change it. And so at James Clear's education and teaching, I always have people start really small. And there are some coaching programs that want you to go out and take massive action in a short period of time. And I understand that massive action will get you massive results if you do it consistently over time. But I typically am going to have them start small. Let's say it's calling their database, right? I know you're one of the masters of databasing. And you know how hard it is for originators to do it on a consistent basis. It's something that probably all sales coaches are harping on. And so if I'm starting someone from zero, I'm going to start them with one call per day. Okay. I just want you to make one. And I'm going to give them something to measure with, right? So, and it's just an on or off. I did the thing or I did not do the thing. I'm not measuring quality or quantity, any of those things. Just did you show up today? Did you maintain integrity with yourself and do the thing? And what I'm having them track is their consistency and measure their consistency. That's the thing that they're going to be rewarded for, is whether or not they're being consistent in that activity. And what I have found is that people will do more than the one. You say, I just want you to make one call, talk to one customer, connect with one. And what typically gets reported back to me is, Cody, it's interesting. I made that first call and then I made a second and a third and a fourth, and so I've got plenty of stories of my originators that I've worked with that there's one in particular that I'm thinking about. He came to me and was having a problem with his consistency. And he's kind of an old school guy. He's a little bit older than me. And he would carry around a paper calendar with all of his closings on it for the month. And he had 2 lists of realtors that he wanted to get business from. And so we created a system so that he could measure. We had to have some kind of a system to this. So we picked up 2 colored markers. And I said, I want you to put 1 dot on the calendar each day that you make the call. Okay, for this list. And then I think it was pink. And then we use blue for the next list. Okay, that's all you need to do. And at the end of the month, all I want from you is a picture of this calendar. That's it. So he does the thing at a high level. He gets the dots every single day for the first month. And 90 days later, he was hitting personal records from production. He literally had to pump the brakes because of all of the activity that he was generating from this consistency. So what I see happen there is that, as he's being consistent, the compound effect starts to kick in, and then his results start to literally hockey stick for him. And I've seen this happen over and over with humans. If they can stay consistent with that, then they end up yielding massive results.
Yeah. What do you think it is that I kind of have some assumptions, but I'd love to hear your viewpoint on why it is that when you give them 1, they do 3 or 4 versus if you would have given them 3 as the goal, maybe many of them would not have accomplished that on a daily basis.
So my thoughts on it is that they are proving to themselves that they can do it with the 1 call. And so they overcome, whatever self-talk or negative feelings or fear, which it's typically going to be fear of rejection or failure. And they make that 1 call and they experience something called cognitive consonance, which is when we show up for ourselves, maintain integrity, and we have that feeling of fulfillment, feeling good every day. And they experience that and they want some more of it. So they pick up the phone and they make some more calls. They realize, okay, I can do this. And they don't want to just do 1. They want to show me that, okay, they can do more than 1. And so they show up and they do 2 or 3 or 5. And I've just found out that when you start small, people will push themselves just a little bit farther. If somebody wants to run a marathon, I'll say, why don't you start with walking for 5 minutes a day? And, we'll build it up so many minutes per week, and then we'll throw in some jogging, and next thing you know, they're running miles at a time. And I'll start that way with myself too. And I'll play that same game with myself, and I'll always end up doing more because I simply push myself on a regular basis. So, I think if they can just get over that hump, right, of not doing the thing and do the thing once, they experience the feeling associated with it and they want more of it. And so they, you know, make more calls thinking that they're going to feel better about themselves at the end of that. And they typically do.
Yeah, I think that I agree with everything you said. And I would add that I think that for a lot of people, if you put out the 3 a day as an example, it can feel daunting and overwhelming, especially when their day gets away from them and it's
Right.
4 in the afternoon and they haven't made the 3. And then what are they left with? Because again, the only relationship you're having is one with yourself. So now you're left with the relationship with yourself is I failed. I start to create an identity that says, I don't do what I say that I'm going to do. I don't trust myself that when I make a commitment that I'll follow through on that commitment. That's a very slippery slope, because once you stop believing in your own word, it can run downhill real fast. Versus if I say I'm going to, or you give the assignment to me that I just want one. That's all I want from you, Tim, is 1 a day. Okay. First of all, any reasonable person's going to say, well, that's not a tall ask. I can call 1 person a day. I mean, that's
Sure.
okay. Now, if I call 2 or 3, I have an entirely different experience. I have a dopamine hit versus the antithesis of that, where I feel shitty. And all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I just crushed it today. I called 2 and I was only required to call 1. I like that feeling. I want to do that again. I want to exceed my goal again. And so much of implementation is about momentum and small victories, which is what you're describing here. And I really love, thank you for taking this conversation, this place. This isn't a place that a lot of people go on this show. And I think this is super valuable information for people to be hearing. Do you have anything else before I pivot?
I do have something. I want to share this with you because I talk about it a lot with the originators that I lead, and it's the concept of integrity. And you've talked about it. And if you ask people what their definition of integrity is, you'll get kind of different definitions. You know, maybe something about being honest or morals or doing what you say you're going to do. And what I've found is there are 2 types of integrity. There's external integrity, where I say, hey, Tim, I'll meet you at this time, and then I show up and do that thing. And then there's the second type, which is, in my mind, even more important, our internal integrity. And that's that conversation that we just talked about, telling yourself you're going to do something and then showing up for yourself and doing it. And this, I know that you'll be able to connect with this. I'll have originators come to me and they'll say, listen, I'm really having a confidence issue. Like I'm struggling. I'm kind of depressed. My business is down, all of these things. And when we get through it, it's because they're not being the person that they're telling themselves that they are, right? They're telling themselves in the morning, I'm going to go to work today. I'm going to make these calls. And then at the end of the day, they haven't made the calls. And that creates cognitive dissonance inside of us, and which is holding 2 opposing beliefs, right, in the same space. And so that's what's happening, because they believe that they are good enough, but they're simply not showing up for themselves. And it's creating that dissonance. And then what I found is that when they do actually maintain integrity, they experience the opposite of cognitive dissonance, which is cognitive consonance. And once again, it's that overwhelming feeling that, hey, I'm good enough, right? Like I showed up for myself today. It's that feeling of fulfillment that, hey, I did the thing. And I think that that's what a lot of human beings are looking for, is that feeling, that I am good enough and that I am strong enough to do this. And when they don't prove it to themselves, it creates a negative reaction that can actually be a downward spiral for people. But you can also experience an upward spiral by doing the opposite and maintaining integrity with yourself. And it doesn't matter if it's 1 call, you still maintained integrity. So you're going to still experience that feeling that you have of showing up for yourself. And so that's a big part of why I think that James Clear has this nailed in terms of starting habits small, just to get that feeling going and to get moving. And then from there, you can take 2 steps, and then you can take 3 steps, and then you can take 4 steps, and you create an upward spiral in your business and in your life.
Yeah. What does he say? Every action that you take is a vote for the person that you're wanting to be, right?
I love that. Yes.
Vote. And it's so true. So it's like all you're saying is, I just want you to vote for yourself 1 time a day. And if it goes to 2 or 3, great. But what we want to start to do is form a new identity of who you are. Know yourself as as the person who does what you say you're going to do. And that will create a flywheel of momentum going forward to where I'd imagine, I mean, I don't know you very well, obviously, and you don't know me, but like, I would imagine that we both fall in the same category. Like, I don't really deal with what we're talking about here personally, because I have, over the course of such a long period of time, followed through on what if I have to work on anything, it may be to flake out a little bit more because maybe I'm a little bit too intense with following on everything. But that's because that's a habit and an identity that I've built over time. Like, I know that when I commit to doing something, I will get it done, and I will typically get it done early.
100%.
That's a knowing that I have from a long history of proving that to be true. And there are so many people out there that unfortunately have the opposite history, which is the narrative that's running in the background is, I'm not sure if I'll end up following through with that, or this will probably be another one of those situations where I say I'm going to lose 10 pounds, or I'm going to work out and I don't, or I'm going to make my phone calls and I don't. And it's really important. So in summary, before we pivot, and thank you for going here, is to slow everything down. Start slow, start small, like pick one little thing that you want to do and do it every single day. And remember, I think he says this in the book too. It's like, you miss a day, it's okay. Get back on track. You miss 2 days, you've started to form a new habit, which is a bad habit. Okay? So if you miss one day, just get back on track. Don't beat the hell out of yourself, but don't miss 2 days in a row, and get consistent with it and watch the momentum increase.
The only thing I would add is to find a way to measure your consistency and be accountable to someone on it. You know, where you're having to report in your consistency. When it's being measured and you know you have to report it to someone, it's a lot easier to show up for yourself, I found.
Out of curiosity, why do you think it is that some originators are sitting around with empty pipelines while others are having some of their best months ever in their careers? Well, as a coach and faculty member inside of the Loan Atlas, it is abundantly clear to me that one type of originator is armed with the information, the inspiration, and the implementation coaching they need to ensure 2025 is more successful than 2024. If you're ready to turn your goals into reality, the Loan Atlas is here to help. Click on the link in the description to schedule your complimentary success consultation now.
So what are the common denominators of top producing originators based upon your experience, both autobiographically and from the many that you've run in circles with? What are 2 or 3 things that you see that top originators do consistently?
So I've always said that the only difference between a top producer and an average producer is how they run their brains and how they run their days. And maybe there's some more in there, but those are the 2 major things. And so with the top producers that I've worked with, been around, I'm friends with, coached, I've coached a lot of those people. They have a mindset that they're not going to be denied that which was meant for them. And it's real distinct. They're not going to be denied their success, and they're going to do whatever it takes to get there. They do have high levels of internal integrity, meaning they're showing up for themselves. They're not afraid of typically personal pain and failure, right? They've got a very high, really kind of high degree of the ability to withstand discomfort, mental and physical discomfort even. And I'm just trying to think through some of the other aspects of these people. They've made a decision for sure that they're going to be great, right? Or die trying typically. And there is no escape hatch to mediocrity with them. They're going to go the hard way. They know that the obstacle's the way. They're going to go to it. They're going to go to the pain. They're going to do the things that are necessary. They're going to pay the price in full and in advance to get what they want.
What about the subject matter? Just out of curiosity, I'll throw this out because I'm just kind of kicking this question around as well and thinking through like my story and those of originators that I've coached. I think also one of the things that top originators do is they intentionally or even unintentionally in some cases just create leverage for themselves to where the fear of not following through is greater than the fear of following through. How does that sit?
It does. And I do agree with that. And I also think that I know this was my personal experience, but I had to really reprogram the way my brain worked about certain things. And let's just take, discomfort, right? Whether it's social discomfort, involved with calling and possibly facing some rejection. That's probably a good one that we all experience in the mortgage industry. And I realized that everything that was good in my life, everything that I wanted was right on the other side of that pain and discomfort. And all I needed to do is just walk through that thin membrane and everything that I wanted would be there for me. And so I think that these people, and that's kind of why I was talking about the high degree of, personal and maybe social pain that they're able to deal with. But I found that they actually are seeking those things out, looking for those opportunities because they know that when they experience discomfort, they're growing, And so that's something that I'm always talking with my originators about is like, asking questions around is how are you making yourself uncomfortable right now? What have you done in the last week that scared the shit out of you? And when they haven't done anything, that's when I'll probably start challenging them. Are you growing? Or are you going backwards? So the leverage piece is interesting. I would love to hear some more examples of maybe where you've seen that.
Well, so two profound ones for me. Trying to think of what order they came in. I believe they were right around the same time, actually, right around the mid 1990s. So the first was I wanted to be interviewed by Todd on his, again, audio cassette series that he used to do.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I think I reached out to him or he reached out to me. I don't know what it was. We had a phone call and it was in like June and he asked me what my production numbers were. And I think at the time I'd funded like 13 million year to date or something like that. And he was curt. Like, I mean, frankly, he was kind of a dick to me. Okay. If I'm being honest. He goes, those aren't big enough for me to interview you. And that was it. No, that was like his answer. And I was like, whoa, like my heart sunk because like, this is a guy that I've been listening to his audio cassettes. I'd gone to his seminars. I wanted nothing more than for him to interview me, but that was a gift to me because that put a stake in the sand. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to show you. And between June of that year and the end of the year, I did 28 million. So 13 million to start the year, but finished at 41 million and called him back up and said, how's 41 million look to you? And he said, you want to drive down to San Diego? And I drove down there and we did the audio cassette interview, right? So he gifted me. I mean, sometimes people are there to like really challenge you. The other one that's more prolific for me was, I had a meeting with my accountant with my former wife at the time. We just got married and we were having like that very first meeting, Cody, that you have with your CPA, like how old do you want to be when you're 40 and how much money do you think you're going to make and how many kids are you going to have and all these things. And when he said, how old do you want to be when you retire? I hadn't put any thought into it. And I just shotgunned an answer out and said 40. And I was 27 at the time and 28 actually. And he leaned back in his chair and started laughing hysterically and said, do you have any idea how much it costs to raise kids and put them through college and inflation and blah, blah. And I remember sitting there thinking, all right, you son of a bitch, how dare you? My new bride, I'm going to show you. And literally every single week for the next 12 years, I thought about 40 and it became my mantra. And to the point where like, even when we went to sell Loan Toolbox, I had the guy from Chase Manhattan Bank sit across the conference room desk from me and said, look, just want you to know, we're going to buy your company, but you're not retiring when you turn 40. And at the time I was 39. And I said, well, man, I'm really sorry that you got an airplane and flew all the way from New York to California to deliver because we don't have a deal. And we didn't sell to them when we sold to somebody else, but I was firmly committed that that's my number and I'm retiring when I turn 40. But that's what I mean by leverage. Like, what are you putting out? Oh, finally, and this is the most important thing actually that I forgot to mention. When I would go speak on stages, all in my early 30s and mid 30s, I would always, in my presentation, declare to the audience that I will retire when I'm 40. I put it out there to the world. That's massive leverage, right? Like, so I couldn't run away from the commitment that I was making. This is what I'm talking about. I say the fear of not doing it.
Right.
Than the fear of doing it. And I had to look at every activity that I was going to be engaged in on a daily basis and whether it was going to serve me in getting to that goal. Otherwise, I'm not going to do it. So I think that it's really important. You don't have to be so grand with it, but like if you're going to make a declaration that you're going to do something, I'm going to go out and I'm going to have 5 real estate agent coffees a month or lunches a month. Okay, that's great. You're making that promise to yourself. Mm-hmm. Are you strong enough to follow through on your commitment to yourself? And if you're not, then who are you going to declare that to? Like, and or what? Like, if I don't do it, how much you're going to donate to your local charity? And
right.
Go to charity and tell them that that this is what I'm going to do if I don't follow through on my commitment. Or go to a coach, as you pointed out, or go to your peers, go to your children and say, look, this is, I have a client, Casey Granston, who's a great guy, and he talked about this in his episode of the podcast. He made a commitment when he was on retreat with us down here in Costa Rica that he was going to shut it down every night at 5:00. He had 2 young little girls. So his leverage was that he went home and they took a shoebox and they put all kinds of photos of the kids from when they were infants, when they walked for the first time, all that. And he had the 2 little girls do it with him. And that box became his phone box. So when he came home every night, the first thing the little girls would say to him is, Daddy, put your phone in the box. They'd take the lid off. He'd put his phone in the box and he'd close it. And the rule was he wouldn't be able to go look at his phone until after he read them a bedtime story and put him to bed. And any time that he had the temptation to go to that box, he'd have to look at these pictures of his little girls that are on the outside of the box. That's massive leverage, right? Like you have to look at the pain of what am I sacrificing here? I'm sacrificing intimacy and connection with my children in exchange for some fear, to your point, that I have of I've got a voicemail waiting for me that's urgent, right? So those are just examples. I kind of went off on a tangent there. But
it's really good insight for me, to be honest with you, because that is not something I spend enough time talking with people about. But I do understand the concept, and it's different than the concept of being good enough. Okay. And I think as humans, a lot of us walk around with this need to prove to ourselves. And honestly, if you've ever read the book, Wild at Heart, it talks about that men walk around with a hole in their heart that can only be filled by their fathers. And so a lot of us walk around with these wounds, right? Because we need for our fathers, whether they're alive or dead, to tell us that we're good enough and we're strong enough. And I've come across this a lot with people that I've coached, a lot of the humans I've talked to that have this need, to be validated. But I haven't thought about the leverage part. And that really is amazing, especially for something like that, that's as important as spending the time with your little girls. That's massive leverage. For me, I think a big piece of the leverage it was my children. And talking about your friend, it really reminded me of it. That, a huge source of fuel for me when I was building my origination career was simply my internal concept of how my children perceive me as their father, right? And a lot of my motivation was around becoming the kind of man that they would be proud of saying, hey, that man over there, that's my father. That's who I am. That's what I'm about. And then what does that man look like and how does he need to be operating in society? So I love your comments about leverage. I'm actually going to spend some more time thinking and reading and studying on that for use in my own practice. So I appreciate you sharing that insight with me.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think the first time that I heard about the concept was just 30 years ago now from Tony Robbins. So
wow.
I'm sure that there's some great content out there from Tony on this topic. I'd actually like to ask you a 2-part question. What do you love about coaching, and what don't you like about it?
Great question. So, part of my story is that I had this period of time where I had just, really crazy increase in my business. Like I mentioned, I was adding 100 new units every single year. I had declared this goal that I wanted to help 400 families in a year. And when I did those things, I stopped being gratified by them personally, and the idea of just going out and doing more and more and more, I was not interested in that. And what happened is in 2016 for me, my boss and mentor came to me and asked, he said, do you want to originate forever? And I said, I love originating. I love helping people. I love the hustle. I don't know if I'll ever be able to get away from it. And I still originate loans today. I said, but I think I might be able to help your originators be better. And so I ended up, becoming his sales manager. And I thought, well, this is going to be real easy. Like I've had a lot of success these last 5, 6, 7 years. I'm just going to tell everybody what I did, like Brian and Heather did with me, and they're going to get the same results, right? Well, I was dead wrong about that. And I ran smack into human beings with their issues. And I realized that I didn't know how to coach people. I didn't have the skills necessary to what I know now is to help people create insights for themselves. And so I did what I'd always done, taking advice that I'd gotten from another thought leader is if you want to add a new skill, go out and read the top 5 books on it. Well, that wasn't going to be enough. I read the 5 books and didn't have what I needed. So I went and hired a coach to coach me on how to coach. And it couldn't be any coach. This guy was a $100 million producer at Wells Fargo of all places, which is a rough place to be a $100 million producer. So I thought this guy's going to understand me and kind of how I operate. And I told him when we first met, I said, we can talk about my origination business, but I'm here to be a better coach. That's why I want to be here, is to get those skills. And on the very first meeting, he said, well, that's easy. We can make this real easy. If you want to learn those skills, this is where we send all of our coaches. And he shared with me a group called the Neuro Leadership Institute. And so I went to the training. What was interesting about the training is I was the only mortgage person in the room. They were all corporate change makers and people from big companies, and it was really interesting. But I got those hard skills and started using them and started seeing impact happening with people. I started seeing things change with them. I saw them having their own insights about what's possible for them. That bred the motivation to actually do the thing they had the insight about. And I started to see lives being changed. Okay. And they were the ones that did the work. Okay. All of it. Okay. I can't take any credit for any of it. But if I can help them have just one idea about themselves, about what they need to be doing to become the person they need to become to get the life and all the things that they want, I found that I was hugely gratified by that, and gratified in a way that I'd never been gratified originating mortgages. And that's a noble profession. We help people achieve the American dream, right? And that feels really good. I still feel great doing that today. But when I start to see, the lives of the wives of the men I work with or the husbands of the women I work with changing because that originator has scaled a business and has completely changed their lives, like I felt like that I'd made some kind of a difference. I'm with them individually, right? And so I became very addicted to that. I know that's kind of a negative phrase, but very drawn to it.
They're healthy addictions.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you for that. I appreciate you letting me off the hook, but I became addicted to helping other people to realize what's possible for them in their lives and then helping them to achieve those things. And so that's what I love about coaching, is helping other people to achieve their goals, being able to use my own story as a mentor in some situations, explaining, what happened to me in those situations, but ultimately helping them to have the insights necessary. And then I'm not a pure coach, okay, because a pure coach has no objective, right? Or no agenda at all, except to help their client have an insight. So I'm more of a combination of a coach and a mentor, or a coaching leader. And so what I do in sessions when I'm working with people is I'm fast hat switching between being a coach and being a mentor, which are two very different things. Coaching is asking questions about the solution. Mentoring is telling someone what the solution is. So I never want to just tell someone, hey, go do this, because I know that they are likely not to do it, right? I'd already tried that. I was like, hey, if you make these calls, you're going to get the same results. That it can't be my idea. It has to come from them. And so I think the skill as a coach is to be able to ask the right questions to lead them to the insight that's inside of them, even though I know the answer, because that insight is the actual source of motivation to go do the thing. And so the gratification associated with seeing lives changed, having an impact. I will share something that's very transparent and selfish here, is that those people end up having a high level of respect for me as a person and as a leader because of the impact that I had on their business and everything else. And so I do get some personal gratification like that because they show a lot of respect towards me as their leader. And this is for any of the mortgage leaders that might be listening to this, but if you want to keep your people forever, simply help them to achieve their goals and they'll stay with you forever. But you've got to go out and actually make those things happen. And I think I'm trying to think about, what do I not like about coaching people? The most challenging part, maybe it's not the part that I like, but the most challenging part is that I can see the potential in people when I talk to them. I know what's there. I know what's possible for them. I know that there's no difference between he and I or she and I. We're both human beings. We all kind of operate the same way, but when I see people just consistently getting in their own way, right? And they've got all the things, they've got all the tools, all the talent, but their mindset and their internal voice keeps them from becoming the person that they could become. And that's difficult. Or when someone settles and I know that they're settling in their life, they're accepting less than what they want for themselves. That's really difficult to see someone do that because it's not my place to try to talk them out of settling. If they decide that's what they want for their life, then that's what's best for them. So that's one of the difficult things that I deal with as a coach.
It's very refreshing. I'm so glad I asked you this question because I believe that there are probably a very significant percentage of the people that are listening to this didn't know this distinction that you've articulated beautifully. Now I use different phraseology. I say it's the difference between being a coach and a consultant, okay, which is the same thing, okay?
Yeah.
And the thing that people often don't understand is that when they hire a coach, they think they're going to get a consultant, which is somebody who's just going to tell them what to do.
Right.
It's so much more powerful when people can arrive at their own knowing and their own answer. And being a truly great coach really requires, and I'm challenged by it consistently myself, it really requires me setting my ego aside, not being attached to the outcome, and not needing to be the hero, not needing to be the one that has all of the answers, but being selfless and saying, I'm just going to hold space for you and ask you really intelligent questions and patiently wait for you to see it. I'm holding up the mirror for you to look at your own reflection and define it for yourself. Because when you do, that's when the transformational experience takes place. And I always know, Cody, and I'm curious if you have had this experience, I always know when my ego is involved in the process, when I get frustrated, a client who is not doing what I know they should be doing and we've talked about them doing. That's when I know, there you go. You're attached to the outcome. Your ego's engaged. Can you have compassion for them and know that they're going to arrive when they arrive and your job is to be there for them when they do, which is really tough, bro. I mean, it's not
It
easy.
is. I appreciate you sharing that. And yes, I 100% connect with that. And I feel it in my chest. It's the first place that I feel that frustration. And there's another side of me from when I was younger and I served in the Marine Corps, where like you never give up, you do whatever it takes, no matter what. We win no matter what, right? And that's not going to be right for everybody. And so you're absolutely right about the ego piece. I find myself getting frustrated and I have to fight back that younger version of myself that wants to, you know, basically break in and tell them exactly how they're wrong and how they need to be handling the situation. But you're right. And part of the issue that I struggle with, to be honest, is that I'm not a pure coach. Okay. You may have the benefit of doing that. And I hope that I get to do that one of these days. It may even be part of my retirement story, but a true coach doesn't have an agenda, but I have an agenda as a mortgage leader.
Mhm.
You know, whether I say I don't or not, I have an agenda, and that's to help these people win at a high level. I get measured that way. They're going to measure me as their leader that way in terms of how effective I am. And so I have to be very cognizant of that I don't allow that to seep too much into the conversation, or I won't reach that insight, that aha moment that you're talking about. And that really is the goal of a coach, is to get them to that aha moment. Because just in my studies of human behavior and trying to figure out how can I help these people unlock success in their life, I know that without that, they won't have the motivation to go do the hard things. But if they do experience that moment with me, they are very likely to go out and do the challenging thing that they need to do to get the thing that they want. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I'm extremely susceptible to that. It's something that I do experience in a lot of the conversations that I have with folks. And when I was younger, I wasn't as aware, didn't have as much emotional intelligence about myself. But just through some other thought leaders and coaches, I've learned about thinking about how we think, right? And thinking about how we're feeling and what's causing that, which is always some sort of a thought. So back to thinking about how we think and being aware of my own thoughts and feelings when I'm in those conversations. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, I just want to say that I think that the originators that you coach that work under you are very fortunate, based upon everything I'm hearing today from you. I mean, I'm just getting to know you, but I'm wildly impressed with many of the things that you've shared. And I wish that more leaders in the mortgage space were taking this approach to truly adding value to their originators by coaching them. And like you said, if you want to retain your originators, just help them continue to grow. The only reason
Correct.
they leave is because you stop doing that. Are you familiar, just as a quick sidebar, and then I have a final question for you before we wrap. Are you familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza?
Oh yeah. Dr. Joe. Love Dr. Joe.
Yeah, I kind of guess you would. I don't know if Josh mentioned this to you, but I'm a big fanboy. I mean, I've been to 6 of his retreats, and
we can have a whole call on manifestation.
Oh, I'm already ready to part 2 of this conversation, buddy. I would love to do that. That would be a lot of. In fact, let's do that.
Let's do it.
I would. We could really go down a big rabbit hole of true value for people in that area. I'm doing. Currently working on a process that I'm creating for our next master's retreat for Leadership 360, which is going to be in October, around the subject matter of worthiness. And I'm wanting to go to that place, which is kind of a tender place. I mean, because it's going to unearth some deeper stories that people have been holding and carrying with them since the younger years of their life. But it's impossible to manifest in our lives from a place of unworthiness, because what you're ultimately doing is you're blocking the ability to receive, because on a deeper subconscious level, or are saying, I'm not worthy of receiving. You have to feel worthy of receiving if you want to manifest, is another way of saying it. Yeah. So we can go down a deep rabbit hole there, but what I want to do is I want to conclude, and I'm so thoroughly enjoyed our time together. I want to conclude with a question that I ask most of my guests on the show, because I think it's a really nice way to end. But I think in the case of you, I'm going to be really anxious to hear what you have to say. So you have an opportunity right now to go back into a time machine and have a conversation with Cody when he was 18 years old. All of the wisdom that you have as the man that you are today, what advice would you share with him?
Do it now. Do not wait. Don't hesitate. Do it right now. I messed around when I was young for a few years, didn't get started on my track until I was about maybe 21. And that's the advice that I would give myself, is to do it now. Whatever that thing is to not hesitate and to take action. The solution to all of my problems is through a couple of things: acceptance and then action. And so that would be the advice that I give myself, is just take action, don't stop, and continue the path of learning. If I get to take all the information back that I have now, I'm not going to need to go through that process again. But thinking about my younger self, it would be about not messing around in my early years and just getting really serious about life and about business, and taking massive action.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you I'm so glad Josh Metal introduced us to each other.
Yeah.
And certainly hopeful that this isn't the last time that we're going to talk. In fact,
I hope not.
Love to do another episode with you.
Sure.
What a blessing you have been to the listeners of this episode of the 360 Experience. Thank you. And I want to say thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened to the show. I hope that you got a ton of value. And if you did, please pass it along to somebody that you think could also benefit from it. There's so many people in this industry that really need some positive influence right now. And the content that Cody and I covered today, I think, is really appropriate for the time that we're in. I wish everybody a successful week, and we'll be back at you in a couple more weeks with the next episode. Thanks, everyone.